couple of weeks ago, I shared my new workflow in Logic, which I'll leave at the end of this video and down below. I was incredibly excited to make that video because while I was prepping for it, I had a couple of really big light bulb moments. The first of which was being that I realized that you could share channel strip settings as aliases on iCloud, so all of your machines stay in sync at one time. That was really exciting. And the second was actually realizing just how many samples I use in comparison to how many I have. As someone who regularly makes their own sample libraries, has access to every product Spitfire Audio's ever made, and because of this YouTube channel, I get sent once or twice a week new products from various developers or small creators. Despite this, I use an alarmingly small number of presets and patches in comparison to the terabytes of hard drive space and thousands of pounds that I've invested over time. I think one reason for this is because some sounds just become part of our sonic DNA, our musical identity. There are some instruments that inspire musicality out of us that we just can't get any other instrument to do, and for me, that's the Wurlitzer 200. I absolutely love that thing. In fact, I love the Keyscape Wurlitzer 200A model so much that I've just splashed to buy a real 200, which I'm going to have in my living room at home. I'm very excited about that. But if there's one thing that I've learned over the last couple of years, is that I'm now slightly more confident in what my sound is. I've started and finished enough projects now to see patterns in my workflow. And while I enjoy reaching for the same sounds over and over again, because that's something that I'm quite familiar with, it does make my hands create similar shapes. So occasionally I'll dive in and see what I can do to make the same sounds sound a little bit different. The same input, but a different output. So today I thought I'd reveal a particular hobby of mine, which is to experiment with tuning stuff down. Now, Christian Henson, this is kind of his domain, his cod science as he calls it, this idea that as you tune stuff down, it becomes more like a sine wave. And we like sine waves because they sound clean and warm, kind of like an organ. Well, one thing that I quite like doing is a similar practice, experimenting with taking textures or taking particular performances of sounds and then tuning them down in a way that can either make something sound totally otherworldly, can sound slightly electric, or can actually just accentuate the range more than its reasonable kind of means. So I've got some instruments here as just a point of demonstration, and I'd really advise you just to try and experiment with stuff yourself because it's really, really fun. So I'm going to start with a bass trombone solo. So with this, I've actually tuned it down by an octave. Now, I'm personally not that interested in the very bottom range because there's more rasp than sub. So what I'm going to experiment with is more around here. Now, just as a point of demonstration here, if I take this back up the octave and play that same note, you can hear it doesn't sound nearly as resonant. There's something about, I don't know if it's the contact algorithm or if it's the way that it's been kind of mangled and shifted, it just sounds more drawn out. And we can use this to our advantage. You can see I don't have any processing on here, but if we wanted, we can maybe take an EQ and pull off some of the top registers so that we've got more of a kind of subby sound. I've done that here as well. If I just play this as it is currently. This is a Scarby bass, and this is a Native Instruments library. I've tuned this down by an octave, so on its own sounds like this. And I've tuned it up by 12 as well, so it's playing the same samples, but it's tuned down by an octave. I found that otherwise it got really, really muddy. So I've then used this FabFilter Pro Q3. I'm just filtering down from about 200 Hertz, so it's really those sub-frequencies. And then I've added the Scarby bass from about 150 up, which on its own sounds a little bit kind of boxy. But you can hear there that by adding that second instance with it down by a whole octave, we've got the kind of bite and the attack of the original, but then that added sub of what might be an amp or something. So that's the first thing, is kind of taking bass instruments and making them even bassier, even more kind of subby. In fact, these days in orchestral music, I find that the double basses often get kind of overshadowed by what is more often kind of an underbass or a sub bass. This tends to be slightly warmer and slightly rounder, and I guess that's what we're getting from taking these samples and tuning them down. But because they still have the character of a bass guitar or a bass trombone, you'll find that they work really well when paired with the original or when paired with a live recording. The second is taking an instrument to its extremes and then bringing it down into something that's slightly more palatable. My favourite here is actually the bass flute. I really love the way this sounds, but I like it in its high register where it's a little bit uncomfortable, it's a little bit fragile. And with this you can create these beautiful kind of almost organ-like pads. So this is tuned down by 2 whole octaves, 24 semitones. And one thing I've done is I've used a dynamic EQ here, again with the Pro Q3, just to pull down some of that kind of whisper sounds. And so the dynamic EQ works really well here. It has a threshold set so that when it passes that threshold, it pulls it down. So it doesn't automatically make it a duller signal, it just makes it duller when that whisper sound is really loud. The other thing I really like is because it's kind of accentuating everything, it's stretching everything out, you get a longer attack and a longer release as well. And the tails are really, really beautiful. You can tell this was recorded in a hall. It just has that natural bloom. Now, you don't have to go down by a whole octave or 2 octaves. In fact, I really like the way, this is my favourite woodwind patch actually, the Albion Neo woodwinds. And if I play this, I've got this down by 4 semitones. It just softens it a little bit. If I take this back up to 0. Sounds lovely, but when we pull it down a little bit more, just sounds that little bit warmer, that little bit more kind of emotional maybe, or a bit more subdued. Moving down, I've actually taken these Tundra travelling trems, which are the string highs. These I've actually tuned down by 2 octaves, which is quite kind of heinous. But I've, as you can see here, I've also added 24 semitones. Now I put a little bit of processing on this, but have a listen to see what you think. Now again, what's so lovely about this is it just rounds everything out a little bit, but also, again, because these tremolos were quite fast and it draws it out, you get this soft kind of undulation between the notes. Now in my processing here, I've just taken off the bottom end. There is quite a big noise floor with these libraries that were recorded really, really quietly. So when you tune it down, you get even more sub build-up. So I'm just pulling that away a little bit, and then I'm trying to compensate for the loss in those high frequencies. I've added a bit of echo. Boy, this is my favorite. This is a kind of custom preset, perfect string echo that I've got. And then I'm also using the crystallizer plugin, and finally a Marg EQ just to turn up those top frequencies really high. I particularly like this Plugin Alliance version. It just does the original justice. It just sounds really, really great, particularly in those high registers. Another thing for drawing out sounds is percussion. You know, you could take something that on the face of it has quite a fast transient and draw that transient out. So on its own, this is how this fencing patch sounds from Kinetic Metal. And you can hear that sound of the kind of a sword, I don't know. So when we bring this down by 24 semitones again, you can hear the sound of that scrape even more. So it sort of becomes a nice call and response. And when we add some echo boy as well, moving down, here's one of my favourite instruments. This is a solo cello. This is the Spitfire solo strings. I pulled this down by 3 semitones because I really like the legato transitions. My only thing is I wish they were slightly longer. So have a listen to this. So because I've pulled it down by 3 semitones here, it's just a little bit longer if I play what it was before. Pull it down again. Now, of course, these things can just be used as ingredients. They don't have to sound realistic on their own. The point is that it can bring out an element of the recording that you might not have noticed when it was played at its normal speed. The last thing I'm going to show you is pianos, and I really love taking this Olaf Reynolds Composer Toolkit down by 8 semitones. Have a listen to this. Again, it softens that sound so much, it creates a little bit more thud, and this is actually particularly accentuated in the Westwood alt piano, alternative piano. It has this trans pitch button, so if I play it normally, sounds great. If I play a chord, you can see it's actually pulled it down by 6 semitones. Now, if I just play the same passage over and over, so as you can hear, as we start to tune stuff down, we do lose some of that high frequency sizzle. But I think this steers really nicely into the types of sound that I like, which is that kind of slightly more lo-fi. It sounds like it's been run through tape. It makes it sound just a little bit less digital, I suppose. And anyway, all of this is just to say, give it a go, see what you think. And I hope you took something away from this. It's always really fun just to take some toys out and have a play with them without any particular motives or ideas about where you're going to go. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you again very, very soon. Goodbye.